Most people approach a prospective mentor the way they approach a job interview, as the candidate hoping to be accepted. They wonder whether the mentor's community will be the right fit for them, whether they'll be able to keep up with the material, whether the mentor will be willing to answer their specific questions. The mental posture is one of hoping to qualify rather than deciding whether to hire. That posture produces poor outcomes because it inverts the actual power dynamic of the relationship. You are the one with the money and the time. You are the one deciding whether to invest those resources in this particular mentor's guidance. The mentor may have expertise that you want to develop, but you are under no obligation to develop it through them specifically. There are other practitioners in most spaces, and if this one does not meet your standards, your time and money are better directed elsewhere. The right mental model for approaching a prospective mentor is as an employer evaluating a hire. You have a clear brief, the gap map from episode 11. It tells you exactly what you need. You have evaluation criteria. That's the credibility tests and red flags from episode 12. And that tells you what good looks like and what to walk away from. And you have a trial process, which we're going to cover today. And that lets you assess a candidate in current conditions before making a commitment. This is a structured hiring decision, not a passive consumption of content in the hopes that something will eventually land. The shift in mindset here is not about arrogance or dismissiveness toward the people you're evaluating. Many of the best mentors are genuinely accomplished practitioners who have invested years in developing expertise and building ways to teach it effectively. They deserve serious engagement from anyone who chooses to learn from them. The point is simply that serious engagement begins with your own clarity about what you need and a structured process for determining whether this person can provide it, not with a deferential posture that treats the mentor as the authority on whether or not you are a good fit for them. Now, with that framing in place, here's the 30-day evaluation process. It's structured week by week, and each week has a different focus that builds toward a decision at the end of 30 days. You can run this process on free content, on paid communities, or both. The structure is the same regardless of whether money is changing hands. Now, before we go through the weeks, one thing that's worth saying about the process as a whole is that most people who engage with a mentor without a structured evaluation period eventually make a decision, but they make it based on accumulated time and familiarity rather than on assessed quality. After 3 months of consuming someone's content regularly, it kind of feels awkward to conclude that they're not the right fit and to move on. The familiarity kind of builds a sort of attachment that makes objective assessment difficult. Running the evaluation process up front, though, within a defined, say, 30-day window, which is what we're advocating, that preserves your objectivity, precisely because you've not yet made the psychological investment that extended passive consumption creates. Now, week 1 is about understanding the method. Your task in the first week is to consume 5 to 10 of the mentor's best reviewed or most foundational pieces of content, the episodes, the articles, the modules that they themselves identify as core to their approach. You're not yet trying to apply anything. You're trying to understand what the method actually is, what it requires of you, under what conditions it works best, and what its known limitations are. By the end of week 1, you should be able to describe the method clearly in your own words. If you can't, either the method is not clearly taught, or you've not yet found the content that explains it at the foundational level. As you work through week 1, write down the answers to 3 specific questions. First, what are the conditions this method requires to work? In terms of market environment, available time, account size, skill level. And second, does the method address the specific gap that you identified in your gap map? Or does it teach something adjacent to that gap without directly closing it? Third, does the mentor explain the reasoning behind the method? Or do they primarily tell you what to do without explaining why? The answers to these 3 questions will tell you more about whether this mentor is right for you than hours of passive consumption. If you reach the end of week 1 and still can't describe the method clearly, that is itself useful information. It might mean the method is genuinely complex and requires more exposure before it becomes clear, in which case extending week 1 by a few days is reasonable. Or it might mean the method is not as coherent as the confident presentation suggested, which is a red flag worth noting. The clearest sign of a well-developed method is that it becomes progressively easier to describe as you consume more of the foundational content, not harder. Week 2 is about testing the method without putting money at risk. Whatever the method involves, trade setups, option positions, investment thesis construction, your task in week 2 is to paper trade or track the method's signals without executing them in a live account. For a trading method, this means identifying the setups that the mentor describes, noting whether you would have taken each one according to their criteria, and tracking what the result would have been. For a systematic investing approach, it means going through the selection process the mentor teaches and identifying which assets would qualify. The goal of week 2 is not to evaluate whether the method is profitable over 7 days. That's far too short a period to draw any meaningful conclusions anyway. The goal is to assess whether the method is clear enough that you can apply it. Can you consistently identify when a setup exists and when it doesn't? Can you apply the selection criteria without ambiguity? If the method is too vague to paper trade reliably, it'll be too vague to execute reliably in a live account. A clear, specific method is one you can apply consistently. A vague method is one that allows too much discretion, which means different people applying it will produce different results. Week 3 is about the community. If the mentor operates a community, join the free tier or the lowest cost entry point and observe how they engage with members. What you're looking for is whether they answer specific, practical questions, whether they address situations where the method is not working as expected, and whether the community produces the kind of shared learning that makes membership genuinely valuable over time. A community where the mentor only appears to share new content and rarely engages with specific member situations tells you something about the depth of support you will actually receive. A community where the mentor regularly works through real member situations in real time, including difficult ones, tells you something very different. Now, you're also assessing the community members themselves in week 3. Are they at a similar stage of development to where you are or where you're heading? Do their questions and discussions reflect genuine engagement with the method, or does the community primarily consist of people seeking general motivation or reassurance rather than specific skill development? A community of people who are actually doing the work and sharing the results of that work is far more valuable than one populated primarily by aspirational learners who are consuming without acting. Now, pay particular attention to how the community handles difficult periods, when the method is not working that well, when the market is producing conditions that the approach struggles with, or when members are reporting losses. A community where the mentor engages constructively with these situations, works through what's happening, and helps members stay calibrated and disciplined tells you a great deal about the quality of the support you will receive when you need it the most. A community where difficult periods are met with silence, or deflection, or generic reassurance tells you something very different. Week 4 is about live application at a small size. If the method involves trading or active investing, take 1 or 2 small, real positions using the method's criteria. Not paper trading, but actual live execution at the smallest practical size. The purpose is not to generate meaningful returns over a week. It's to experience what it feels like to execute the method with real capital and real emotional stakes, and to notice what happens to your decision-making under those conditions. Do you apply the method's criteria consistently, or do you find yourself modifying them when actual money's at risk? Do you manage the position according to the method's rules, or do your emotions override the process? The answers are informative regardless of whether the specific positions are profitable. At the end of week 4, you've worked through the method conceptually. You've tested it through paper trading, you've assessed the community, and you've experienced 1 or 2 live executions. That is a meaningful body of evidence on which to base a decision. Far more meaningful than deciding after watching a few videos or reading some testimonials. Now, at the end of 30 days, you arrive at one of 3 outcomes. Each one is a legitimate result, and none of them represents a failure of the process. The first outcome is higher. The method is clear and replicable. Your week 2 paper trading produced consistent results that you understand. The community is active and specific. The live execution in week 4 felt manageable. You can see the path from where you are now to operating this method confidently. In this case, commit. Engage more deeply with the content. Invest in the community at the level that makes sense for your development. And begin applying the method systematically in your own account. The 30-day trial has given you a sound basis for that commitment. Now, what committing means in practice will vary depending on the mentor and the method. For some, it means subscribing to a paid community. For others, it means working through a structured course systematically rather than consuming content randomly. For others still, it means dedicating a defined amount of weekly time to engaging with the mentor's current content and applying it in your own trading or investing. The form of the commitment matters less than the fact that it's genuine. You're not just consuming content passively, you're actively applying the method and tracking your results against it. One practical discipline worth establishing at this point is a review schedule. Every 3 months, revisit your assessment of the mentor against the original gap map entry that led you to them. Has the gap closed meaningfully? Are you applying the method more confidently and consistently than you were at the start? Is the mentor still providing value at your current level of development, or have you begun to outgrow what they can teach? The answers to these questions tell you whether to deepen the engagement, to maintain it, or to begin looking for the next level of guidance in this area. The second outcome is to continue evaluating. The method has shown promise, but 30 days is not enough to reach a confident decision. Perhaps the market conditions during week 2 were unusual and did not produce enough representative setups to assess the method fairly. Perhaps the community is active, but you've not yet had a chance or a specific situation arise that would test the mentor's depth of engagement. Perhaps the live execution in week 4 was too limited to draw conclusions. In any of these cases, extending the evaluation by another 2 to 4 weeks is a reasonable response. And not because you're avoiding the decision, but because the evidence genuinely is not yet sufficient to make one. The key discipline in the continue outcome is setting a specific endpoint for the extended evaluation and defining in advance what additional evidence you're looking for. An open-ended continuation is not really an evaluation, it's just procrastination. If you extend the trial, you should know exactly what you expect to learn in the additional time and what decision you'll make if the new evidence supports the method or if it doesn't. The third outcome is to pass. The method does not close the gap you identified. The paper trading results were too ambiguous to form a basis for confidence. The community was too general or too shallow to provide the kind of specific support that would accelerate your development. Or the live execution revealed that the method requires more of you in time, attention, emotional capacity, or account size than you can currently commit. In any of those cases, passing is the right outcome. And passing after a 30-day evaluation does not mean the mentor is poor or that the method is invalid. It means this particular mentor and this particular method are not the right fit for your situation at this stage. And that's a valuable conclusion to reach cleanly after 30 days, rather than discovering it 6 months into a paid membership after significant time investment. Move on to the next candidate from your shortlist and run the same process. Now, you do not have to evaluate mentors sequentially, by the way, one at a time. It's entirely practical to run 2 or 3 evaluations simultaneously in parallel, one per engine, for example, as long as you keep them separate in terms of how you apply and track each method. The risk of running multiple evaluations at once is not confusion about the evaluation process itself, but rather confusion about the methods being evaluated. If you are simultaneously applying a futures trading approach from one mentor and a systematic options approach from another, and you're not keeping the two entirely separate in your practice and your tracking, you're not going to be able to assess either one of them fairly. The practical rule is one method per engine per evaluation period. So you're evaluating a specific income engine's mentor and their specific method separate from your evaluation of a growth engine mentor's specific method. The 2 evaluations can run concurrently because they involve different engines with different activities. Trading and systematic investing don't overlap in execution. But within each engine, keep the evaluation clean, one method at a time, tracked separately assessed on its own merits. One more thing worth saying about the evaluation process before we move on. The 30-day structure is a framework. It's not a rigid rule. Some methods will reveal themselves as a poor fit within a week, and there's no value in continuing the full 30 days when the evidence is already clear. Other ones will take longer than 30 days to assess fairly, particularly if the method involves positions that play out over a month or more. The purpose of the 30-day structure is to give you enough time to form a genuinely informed view, not to impose an artificial deadline that ignores the nature of the method that you're evaluating. Use your judgment and adjust the timeline when the specific method genuinely requires it. Once a mentor has passed the evaluation and you've committed to learning from them, take note of when your engagement with their content starts to shift from active learning to passive consumption. Every mentor has a point at which you've absorbed most of what they have to teach you at your current level. The content still feels familiar and comfortable, but it's no longer producing new insights or capabilities. That's the signal to begin looking for the next level of guidance. Not to abandon what you've learned, but to find the mentor who takes you further from where this one got you. Now, the evaluation process we covered today changes the nature of your relationship with prospective mentors from the moment you begin. You're not hoping to be taught. You are deciding whether to hire. You have a gap map that tells you what you need, credibility tests that tells you what good looks like, and a structured 30-day trial that lets you assess whether a specific candidate delivers what you need in real conditions. That combination gives you far more reliable grounds for a decision than the way most people approach mentorship, which is to start consuming content, to develop an attachment to the presenter, and to find it increasingly difficult to assess the actual value of what they're receiving. The process applies equally to free YouTube content, or to paid communities, or to structured courses. In each case, the week-by-week structure is the same. Understand the method, test it without risk, assess the community, and experience live execution at small size. Then decide. The only thing that changes is the financial cost of running the trial, which varies depending on what access requires. The next 2 episodes bring the module to a close. We'll go engine by engine and look at what the virtual investing organization looks like when it's fully assembled, what kind of mentor you're looking for in each engine, what their role in your development is, and how the support function roles fit around the 3 engines. Then in the final episode of Module 2, we'll walk through our own virtual investing organization for the $1 Million Experiment, the types of mentors we chose for each engine, the criteria we used to evaluate them, and what the selection process looked like in practice. If you've not yet started building your gap map or shortlisting mentor candidates, now is a practical time to do that before the next episode. The more concrete your brief, the more useful the engine-specific content in the next episode will be. So remember to like and subscribe so you don't miss it, and we'll see you there.